mean, that first episode.
That was amazing. Like, that was right into it. We were just like thrown right into like the scene of everyone, seeing all the characters there. Like, it was such an interesting take for a first episode because there was such heavy topics introduced. They weren't like it wasn't like a nice slope up, like steady, we're going first introduce you. No, we were just this is how it is. It was truly like the reality of what was happening at that time, and it was just so good. Like tears, chills, just excitement, being like, "Oh my god, Jesus." So that no, it was an amazing first episode. What did you think?
Definitely, as I was watching, it was interesting, but I'm thinking like, when's Jesus going to show up, right? Right? But like the way they did it was just so good, like just in the right moment. And the thing that really resounded with me when I first watched the episode, when he as Mary's running, like basically starting to run away, he says Mary. And I thought to myself, I was like, man, when they get to the resurrection episode, when like Mary encounters Jesus in the garden, and that's when she recognizes him when he says Mary, it's gonna be the exact same way. And I just thought like this is beautiful. And speaking of Mary Magdalene, the other thing that kind of really stood out to me is like when the episode begins when she was little, right? And she's like, Papa, I can't sleep, and the reason why she can't sleep is that she's afraid. I think one of the themes that definitely of this episode is fear. I think a lot of people experience, just as a part of the human experience, like we have a lot of fears, and sometimes like fears keep people up at night and stuff like that. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
No, for sure. Like I think it resonates with like everybody watching. Like fear really is evident in all of our lives, like in all stages of our lives as well. Like even me as like an adolescent, like grade 12 going into like university, being kept up saying, "Oh, am I going to get in? Am I not going to get in?" Then you have like exams and thinking about your future, like even like the small fears that we have. I feel really guide us to like the right direction, or we really need something there when we experience these times of fears.
And that's a really good point that we need something there because I think as an adult who's in my professional life, I like to think that fear is not a major motivation in my life, but if I'm honest, I would say it is, like not just the things that I do, but also how I do them, and most of the time, like how I worry about them, and a lot of it is actually very very fear based. So in this episode, we're introduced to four main characters, right? Matthew, Simon, Nicodemus, and Lilith. So maybe you can tell us about some of them.
Yeah, so starting with Matthew, we know that he is going to be a disciple of Jesus. Like, no spoilers or anything, but I think it's really interesting to see him being of the higher income, very clean, very nice, probably expensive clothing and expensive like lifestyle. And I think it was really interesting how he had to get to his booth, how he had to shield away. And as the person who was taking him to his booth, he was saying, "No, I'm not going any further with you." And saying, like, it really shows how Matthew is so isolated from his own community that they are saying, "No, like, I do not want to be associated with you. Being seen with you would hurt me. Like, I don't want to take any of your money to go further because of the impact it would have on my own." So I think Matthew, it is really important to see how he is isolated from his community. And I really want to see what they are going to do to like develop his character, how he's going to come back and bring back to his community and be a part of his religion. Because I know that because of his like wealth, it is also like pushed to the side, saying, "Okay, well, I'm I'm definitely privileged and I don't need religion." So I think that was really interesting to see taken from Matthew as one of Jesus' disciples. Simon, he was definitely also one of Jesus' disciples. No spoilers there. But I thought it was so interesting how he wasn't that, like, he was religious, but it wasn't a priority to him. Like, it was definitely off to the side. Like, I know my stuff, I can participate in the traditions, but it's the world that we're living in that we gotta work for ourselves. Like, we have to do it to be accomplished, to be successful. So he was being in a lot of like dealings, bettings, trying to get money. He was like really into like some sketchier stuff. And I thought it was just interesting. Again, one of Jesus' disciples being a flawed character, and his like religion wasn't important to him, which I thought was so interesting because it's like, you're a Jesus disciple and this is how you're acting before this? Like, I thought it was so cool.
Yeah, and we also meet Nicodemus earlier on in the episode. Very well respected person, teacher of teachers they call him, right? Everywhere he goes, there's this deference, and I guess he knows how to play the part, right? But at the same time, we also see a very human side of him. I think Nicodemus, we see a lot of people have expectations of him, but he is very aware of his own questions and his own conscience. He wants to be authentic to what he believes and where he's at, but at the same time, he feels this kind of tension, with the expectations that are placed on him, right? And of course, then there's Lilith. So the episode just right from the beginning, like we see she has lost a lot in her life, and she's been through many traumatic experiences. And there's this one part just really kind of gripping for me is I think when she kind of wakes up the next day after, like Nicodemus is not able to, expel the demons from her, and she's just trying to, picking up the furniture around her room, and then she tries to read out that prayer, and then she just like breaks into tears, and she's just so angry, like this experience of like, I tried, I prayed, and like it didn't work, like where were you kind of thing, or not even just. And then we see, she then tries to take things into her own hands, right? And then, or at the very least, to numb the pain, But then something happens. So, all right. And I guess, like, did you feel like you identified with any of the four main characters, or?
Yeah, for sure. What one character that really stood out for me and like connected with me was Simon, because like growing up in this like day and age, like having like the media present and religion not being a big part or a big priority in today's world that I've like recognized with even my own friends. But also I experienced it so much throughout high school, saying like, well, I have my friends, my families, my schoolwork, my work, and then religion was more of a hindrance. Like I didn't have time for it. But when I had all these priorities, I felt like they weren't directed anywhere. Like there was no, it was all scrambled, and it felt like I had like no direction. And I feel Simon really has that feeling where his whole life, like he's doing things for himself. He has his family to prioritize. He has this income, the taxes that he has to pay. So religion, like he didn't have time for it. But with all these efforts that he's making, where is he going with it? Which I thought I really connected with Simon with that. How about you, Father Raph?
Well, I kind of identify a little bit with, with everyone. I definitely, I remember when I rewatched it for this, and the opening scene where like Matthew's like getting ready in the morning, he opens his wardrobe and like it's all the same, it's all the same outfit. I'm like, oh, that's familiar. Yeah, but also there is a certain element like as he's going through the marketplace, like the people look at him weird. Like I sometimes get that, like because of stuff that unfortunate things that priests have done, like we know in the news. Like when I walk around, I feel sometimes like, and sometimes people do look at me kind of like like no one's like calling me out like the way they tax collector like, but yeah. So I sort of experience that a little bit. So that's kind of something I identify with, and also Nicodemus. I mean, again, so Nicodemus is a professional person, and there's a lot of expectations on him. And I feel like myself, and I think that just everyone, like, I'm sure students as well, feel like there's a lot of expectations on them. And so that tension between like being authentic to like what's happening in my life and my own questions and stuff like that, while also trying to balance the expectations people have of me. But actually also identify a little bit with Mary Magdalene or Lilith, right? I mean, I've not had, I don't think, many traumatic experiences, but I've experienced loss in my life, and um, the very beautiful thing is that, when she's, about to jump off that cliff, right? Then, God steps in, right? There's that kind of like dove like hovering, and she just kind of follows. And there's definitely been moments in my life where I wasn't on a cliff, but I was definitely heading one way, and then God just kind of stepped in a kind of unexpected way. Nothing too dramatic per se, but leading me to the next part. So I definitely identified with that, and that's something that I'm very grateful for.
Divine intervention working its best. Yeah, I think that's awesome. All right, that's a wrap for us. And I really hope that you have liked our first episode of our discussion. And I hope you take some time to reflect on what you've heard. If you would like some prompts, there's a link in the description below for 3 discussion questions that you can take and read over with family or friends, or even by yourself.
And for those of you who are joining in person in the Lenten series, unlike me, feel free to help yourselves now to coffee and treats. And I hope you're able to have a brief discussion, amongst yourselves to just kind of take in, the things that you've seen and heard and thought and felt so far. So that's it for us. And please remember to share, like, and subscribe. And we'll see you next week.